The day Willie confessed to that poor girl, he locked me in the equipment room. I banged on the door begging him to let me out. He stood there, one hand in his pocket, casually saying, "Olive, this is your punishment for slandering her, so just take it." After the hour of being locked in, he finally let me out at the door of the equipment room. He was holding the poor girl's hand, smiling lazily. "Remember to bring us breakfast tomorrow." But after that day I quietly transferred schools and never appeared in front of him again. I heard that Willie had been searching for me everywhere. Years later, he was waiting for me downstairs by my dorm, gripping my shoulders, gritting his teeth. "Olive, is your heart made of flesh? How could you just abandon me like that?" The adult gift my dad gave me was a watch, a white strap, a silver dial. It wasn't very expensive, but it cost him half of his monthly salary. But suddenly the watch was gone, and it turned up on Gloria's wrist. When I quietly asked her to return it, Gloria looked at me in disbelief. "What are you talking about? This is my watch, not yours." As I saw the classmates around us start to look, Gloria suddenly raised her voice, looking at me with righteous indignation. "I know you've always looked down on poor students like me, but how can you accuse me of stealing just because you lost something once?" She said that the classmates, who had no idea what was going on, immediately started whispering, "Why does she look down on poor students? Her mom is just a waitress, right?" others said. "But Gloria's watch really does look like the one Olive was wearing the other day. Gloria is on government assistance. How could she afford a watch? My watch had a scratch on the dial, which happened when I was cutting vegetables for my mom, and at that moment the watch on Gloria's wrist had the exact same scratch. When I pointed it out, Gloria froze for a moment, then quickly hid her hand behind her back, stubbornly saying that that scratch was from me using scissors. But her explanation was too weak, and the classmates began murmuring about her. Just then Willie walked into the classroom carrying his backpack. Gloria, like she saw a lifeline, looked up at him, her eyes lighting up. "Willie," after hearing Gloria's version of the story. Willie rubbed her head. When he turned to look at me, he narrowed his eyes and ordered coldly, "Apologize to Gloria." I was confused and asked him, "Apologize for what?" Willie raised Gloria's wrist. "This watch, I bought it for her a couple of days ago. She said she liked your watch, so I bought it for her right at the store in the mall." Willie sneered, raising an eyebrow. "Olive, you know how important reputation is to someone, yet because you looked down on a poor student you accused her of stealing. Don't you think you should apologize?" In just a few words he changed everything. "So it was Willie who gave it to her. Looks like we were wrong about her. Who cares about the scratch? Maybe Olive just made that up." How could Olive do this without understanding the situation? She just blamed it on Gloria. Seeing this, Gloria smiled mockingly at me, her grin full of provocation. She pointed subtly at her drawer, and then without a hint of hesitation she blocked it with her body. But I saw it clearly. There was a brand new watch in the corner of her drawer. That was the one Willie had given her. "The one you gave her is in her drawer. This one is obviously mine," I said, growing desperate, shouting at Willie, "Why don't you check her drawer?" Gloria suddenly welled up with tears. "Are you going to search my drawer now? Why should I let you?" She stared at me stubbornly, her tears on the brink of falling. "I'm poor. My family situation is bad, but does that mean you can trample on my dignity? I'm not trying to search your stuff. The new watch is in your drawer. All you need to do is move aside and everyone will see it." I even tried to give her an out. "Maybe there are just two watches that look alike. You might have mistakenly taken mine." But as soon as I said that, Gloria's tears fell. "Because I'm a poor student, does that mean if someone gives me a watch you automatically think I stole it?" She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, raising her chin defiantly. "Fine, search it though," she said. That Gloria kept her back pressed against the drawer, refusing to move an inch before I could do anything. Willie suddenly grabbed my arm, his voice cold as he snapped, "Enough. If you lost something, admit it. If you're still thinking about it, I'll give you 10,000 yen to buy a new one. Stop bullying Gloria here." I overheard some classmates murmuring, "Oh, so Olive is trying to extort Willie money." I quickly explained, "I'm not." But Willie suddenly leaned in, getting close to me, a lazy smile curling on his lips. "OL, what are you trying to act so high and mighty for? Have you been hanging around with me so much that you really think you're from the same world As me, Gloria is a poor student and your mom is just a waitress at a restaurant. Who are you looking down on? Willie is a rich second generation and my family is just an ordinary working class family in theory. We shouldn't have anything to do with each other, but when Willie ran away from home as a child he suddenly had an asthma attack and collapsed at the door of my mom's restaurant. My mom took him to the hospital and saved his life. After that, every day after school Willie would come to my mom's restaurant to buy a meal. He became close to me in middle school, though we weren't in the same class. Every time class ended Willie would wait for me by the classroom door. He would lazily lean against the door frame, his slightly tousled hair covering his eyebrows, and wave at me, "Let's go home." After I came out he would naturally take my backpack. He wouldn't take the driver's car but would walk with me through the long alley, walking me home. When we reached my house he would turn his back to the setting sun and wave at me in the glow, "I'll pick you up for school tomorrow." I always had this illusion that Willie and I were really good friends, but now with a smile on his face Willie asked me, "These shoes I'm wearing, your mom works a whole year and still couldn't afford them. You're not a rich person, so why look down on Gloria?" But I never looked down on Gloria. The last time the school organized a donation for poor students I gave away all my pocket money. Listening to his words the classmates' eyes were filled with disdain. "Your own family is so poor, and yet you're pretending to be rich, wearing a watch never buy the same things as Olive, or you might get extorted by her. What do we do now? Our school uniforms are the same. Olive probably won't say I stole her uniform, right?" Laughter suddenly rang out in the crowd. Willie knew full well how much reputation matters to a person, but he was letting my name be ruined like this. Willie crossed his arms impatiently, urging me, "Apologize." Everyone was watching me, pressuring me with their eyes to apologize to Gloria, but I didn't do anything wrong. "You up anymore? I have a new mission." With every word, my heart dropped a little. By the time he said the last sentence, my heart hit rock bottom. All the way, he was excitedly talking about Gloria, but just 2 days ago, he couldn't stop talking about me. The one short journey now felt unbearably long, as if it would never end. When we reached my doorstep, he finally remembered me. "Oh right, you said you wanted to tell me something before school. What was it?" I was going to tell him about the transfer, but at that moment, I just unlocked the door and didn't even look up. Was I forgot. In the following days, Willie was completely focused on Gloria. He didn't press me for answers, and I didn't bring it up again. Now, looking into my mom's worried eyes, I nodded. "Let's transfer. That way, our family can be reunited." For the remaining days, my mom handled the transfer paperwork at school, and I studied alone at home. But tonight, she hadn't come back yet. I tried calling her, but her phone might have been dead. I put on a coat and went out to look for her. I passed through 2 alleys and finally saw her, hunched over, walking home with a heavy heart. The street lamp stretched her shadow long. When she saw me, she slowly smiled. "I'm here." On the way back, she seemed like she wanted to say something, but she opened her mouth a few times and couldn't get the words out. I couldn't help but say, "If you want to say something, just say it." My mom hesitated for a moment before she spoke with difficulty. "Today, I saw your classmates. They walked past me, and their conversation suddenly got loud, like they were trying to make sure I heard. They said the reason you hadn't been to school for days was that you had falsely accused a poor student of stealing, and when it was exposed, you were too embarrassed to go back." Just then, my phone buzzed. There were 3 messages in a row from Willie. "I know you like me, but you don't have to avoid me just because I have a girlfriend. We're all adults, so stop being childish. The things you did wrong, Gloria has forgiven you. Don't ruin yourself. Bring me breakfast tomorrow. I'm giving you one chance. Be a good girl, okay?" I glanced at the messages, then put my phone down, looking at my mom. "Mom, what do you think?" She zipped up my jacket without a word of reproach, her eyes full of tenderness. They said those things about you, and it hurts to hear it. You must feel even worse inside. Though I don't know exactly what happened, I know what kind of person my daughter is, and no one can talk down to me about her. You must have been through a lot. I wanted to be a strong daughter in front of my mom, but for some reason, at that moment, I couldn't hold back my tears. She wiped them away. Don't cry. The transfer paperwork is all done. We'll go to a new city, to a new school, and start a new life. Through the tears, we exchanged a smile, wiped away the last of our tears, and walked up the hill together, pushing the cart. Suddenly, I remembered Willie's messages and took out my phone. I didn't reply. I just blocked him completely. I was going to start a new life. So Willie, goodbye forever. In the new city, I went to college and never returned to that northern town. Willie was sealed away in my memories. In my third year, the school held a social event. Class monitor Hi insisted that I sign up with her. Olive, just come with me. Hetty was my best friend in college. Unable to resist her persistence, I agreed. By the time H and I arrived, a lot of people had already gathered. Just as the event was about to start, I suddenly heard a sweet voice. Willie, the leaves are just the right color. Could you take a picture of me? That voice was too familiar. I instinctively turned around and saw Gloria. The person next to her, leaning against the red maple tree with his arms crossed, his sharp features framed by a messy fringe, was Willie. The moment I saw him, I quickly turned my head, pretending I didn't recognize him. Old acquaintances should stay in the past. There was no need for them to reappear. The host of the social event arrived and began calling out names for the groups. Soon, my name was called. Olive, here. The next moment, another voice sounded. Someone called my name. Olive. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Willie calling me. Why hasn't he left yet? Is the maple leaf that beautiful? I was swallowed up by the crowd and didn't respond to him, acting as if I didn't hear. After all, from his perspective, all he could see were a bunch of backs of heads. Who knows which one is mine? It seemed like Gloria was persuading Willie, saying, just go. It's just a coincidence. It can't possibly be her. She's been gone for years. She left because you exposed her for falsely accusing me of stealing, and she was too embarrassed to face me again. How could she dare show up in front of you? There was a long silence on the other side. Willie didn't speak, and his footsteps were all over the place. I guessed he must have left with Gloria. The social event was simple. Everyone gathered, played games, and got to know each other. Time passed quickly. As the event was about to end, a guy from my group came up to ask for my phone number. After the event, Hi suddenly tugged up my sleeve and whispered, "There's a really handsome guy who's been staring at you since the event started. He's standing under that tree." I looked in the direction she pointed. The area under the tree was empty, with no one there. Hi rubbed her eyes. He was just standing there. How did he disappear so quickly? She wanted to run over to check, but I stopped her. Forget about him. Let's go back to the dorm. On the way back, Hi kept talking about the guy who had been watching me. He's really handsome. During the game, I noticed he was looking at you with such intensity. Too bad you weren't with me, or I would have told you right away. His looks are definitely your type. Don't you want to think about it? Maybe if we go back, he'll be standing under the red maple tree again. She kept going on, and I interrupted her. After staring at him for so long, did you catch the brand of his denim jacket? Hi thought for a moment. From the logo, it looks like it's from LV. That's it. Ever since I've known him, aside from the school uniform, Willie has always worn designer brands from head to toe. Hi touched her nose awkwardly and said, "Seems like he's rich, and we're not from the same world. Let's forget about it." She stretched out lazily. "In the end, making money is the most reliable. We should think about where we can pick up some part-time work." Hi and I both came from poor families. Since our freshman year, we've worked part-time jobs and tried hard to secure scholarships, hoping to lessen the burden on our families. After I returned to the dorm, my life went back to the way it was. That brief appearance of Willie and Gloria felt like a mere illusion. Just when I thought university life would continue as usual, I suddenly saw a familiar figure at the entrance as I went downstairs. I couldn't avoid it, and our eyes met. Willie smirked, his tone casual, but his voice was cold. "Long time no see, Olive." Holding on to Wiley's neck pressed against his ear which had turned bright red from the cold, looking back all I could see in the snow were footprints stretching far from the distance. At that time I naively thought that our lives could overlap just like those footprints in the snow. He seemed lost in the distant memory and said a lot. He mentioned getting into a fight where the other party was many against one and his ear was scratched. I found him on the playground and dragged him home carefully. Cleaning his wound at dusk, he also talked about how ever since I fainted from low blood sugar he kept a stash of candy in his pocket, and eventually even he got into the habit of eating candy by the time he finished. My mom sighed a little. Back in the old town her best friend was why, before she transferred, she had so much going on at home she didn't even have time to invite you out for a meal. She put some eggplant on my plate and smiled. "Do you remember the night before you transferred? You were bullied and didn't come home all night. I was about to lose my mind. Willie is such a kind boy. He told me you were helping him with a lesson so I wouldn't worry." Hearing this, Willie froze for a moment, then awkwardly tugged at the corner of his mouth but didn't respond. I suddenly felt nauseous. Locking me in the equipment room and then pretending to be the good guy in front of my mom. How dare he act in front of me like that? A villain shouldn't be treated as a hero. Mom, I put down my chopsticks and looked at her. That night when I didn't come home I was locked in the school's equipment room. My mom, who had been trying to protect me from the truth back then, immediately asked, "Who locked you?" "Willie." Both of my parents were stunned. They put down their chopsticks and looked at Willie with heavy gazes. Willie hadn't expected me to suddenly bring this up. He swallowed the lotus root slice in his mouth and hurriedly explained, "This is how it went. Remember your uncle bought a watch? Well, I gave the same watch to a poor student in my class. Olive lost hers, and then blamed the poor student, humiliating her in front of everyone. I was young and impulsive. I thought Olive had done something wrong and should be punished, so I locked her in the equipment room. I didn't mean anything by it. I just wanted her to learn a lesson." By the end of his explanation he looked at me directly and for the first time apologized. "Olive, no matter what, locking you up for a whole night was my fault. I'm sorry." I ignored him and just looked at my parents. I wanted to see their reaction. My mom's gentle smile disappeared. "So Olive looks down on poor students. She lost something and then blamed it on the poor student." Willie remained silent. His silence spoke louder than words. "Willie, you've known Olive for 11 years. 11 years, not 11 days. Don't you know what kind of person she is?" My mom suddenly stood up, pointed toward the door, and shouted, "Get out of my house." My dad said nothing, but with disgust he grabbed Willie's jacket and dragged him toward the door, slamming it shut behind them. "I thought you were a good kid, but it turns out you've been bullying her." My mom couldn't hold back her anger, hands on her hips, shouting at him, "What a piece of trash." She cursed for a long time through the door, then turned around and put her arm around my shoulder. "You've been wronged. I'm never talking to that trash again." My dad didn't ask what happened back then. He just came over and stood by me. He's not usually someone who expresses himself, but now he awkwardly said, "We believe in you. You would never do something like that. You don't need to explain. Your dad believes in you. See, that's my forever support and confidence." That meal after Willie left, we ate even more happily. When I headed back to school this week, my parents took me to the subway station. I had just boarded the train when someone cautiously asked, "Olive, is that you?" I turned to look and saw a girl looking at me shyly. Her face seemed familiar. After a moment of thinking I realized it was Ivy, my classmate from high school. She sat in the back row, didn't talk much, and we didn't have much interaction. When she saw me she was so happy and started chatting with me for several stops. We exchanged phone numbers. I got off at the next station, but she got off one stop earlier than me. Before she left she suddenly said, "Olive, I'm sorry." I didn't know what she was apologizing for and I wanted to ask, but the subway doors closed and she quickly disappeared from My sight the chat was empty and she never brought up the apology again. I thought I might have imagined it that night. Right after I got back to the dorm she added me to a group. The group had Willie and Gloria in it. It was the class group from high school with me added. There were 53 classmates in total. Then she tagged me in the group and sent a long message. I never expected that the truth, which had been hidden for years, would be suddenly exposed. 3 years later out of the blue. During the senior year physical checkup we had to get a chest x-ray and were forbidden from bringing in anything metallic. I took off my watch and put it in my backpack. Gloria was the first to finish all the checkup items and returned to the classroom. She went through my backpack, found my watch and put it on her wrist. Then she left the classroom and returned with the others. But that day Ivy didn't go for the checkup, because she wasn't feeling well. When Gloria first came back to the classroom, Ivy happened to walk out of the bathroom. She saw Gloria stealing my watch and putting it on. I heard you guys mocking Olive and it made me feel really uncomfortable, but I was too weak back then, and following the principle of not getting involved in unnecessary trouble, I just kept my head down and didn't say anything. My conscience has been uneasy after Olive transferred schools. I felt even guiltier. I kept thinking I owed her an apology. If I ever saw her again I would definitely apologize in person and tell her the truth. Olive, I'm so sorry. I knew you were innocent, but when the other classmates were mocking you I chose to stay silent and let them tear you apart. Over the years I've dreamed about that day countless times, seeing the uncomfortable look on your face. I really am sorry. I stared at these words, unable to speak for a long time. After a while my old desk mate suddenly spoke up in the group. Actually that day I saw another watch in Gloria's drawer. The one Olive was wearing really was hers, not the one Gloria had. But I knew Willie liked Gloria and I knew he came from a wealthy family. I didn't want to offend Willie, so I stayed quiet. Olive, I'm so sorry. The truth stirred up a storm. Classmates who hadn't spoken in years suddenly flooded the group with messages. I blindly believed Willie back then and wrongly blamed you. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said such hurtful things. I'm sorry. I just picked a side without knowing the truth. I'm sorry. I stared at these messages for a long time, then sighed deeply. It's okay, it's all in the past now. In fact, the ones who should be apologizing aren't them but the instigators, the ones who stole from me and hypocritically smeared my name, the ones who had known me for 11 years but still pushed me into the abyss. And yet Willie and Gloria remained silent. Before long I received a friend request. Olive, it's Willie. I have something I want to say to you. I didn't accept his request. It was strange. The truth had come out, but suddenly I felt like crying.